Hi, everybody. I'm here today to talk to you about pendulums. So there's lots of different kind of pendulums. This one belongs to my son, but sometimes I borrow it to show people because it's really cool. It's got lapis lazuli and clear quartz, so it's kind of neat. And this one's my favorite. So a pendulum is a weighted object that is attached to a thread or a string, or in this case, a chain. So it just needs to be able to freely kind of swing around there. Pendulums have been used for not just magic, but for lots of other things like building clocks, um, creating power, dowsing, finding water, stuff like that. So it's not just a magical object, though they are used a lot for magic now. Now, some magical things that people do with pendulums is they use them to read energy. So if you are in a haunted location and you want to know where the spirit energy is, you might hold your pendulum up and let it kind of swing in the direction where the spirit is. So you would follow it to wherever it pointed you to, and you might be able to communicate more easily with spirit in that location. Some people use pendulums to communicate with their higher self or their subconscious. So they would ask yes or no questions, or positive negatives, and kind of let the pendulum do what it does. You have to be very able to kind of remove yourself from a personal situation if you were going to use a pendulum to get a yes or no answer from your higher self about something that you're personally going through. Some people do yes no readings for other people, which is like kind of a cool thing to do. And then you're not attached to the situation. So if you got somebody else to hold it, that might work for you. Just kind of depends on what you believe, I guess. So some people use pendulums to determine different health issues. Now, I was aware of this. I've been aware of this for a really long time. My grandma actually gifted me this book a long time ago. She went to a workshop in the 70s and she got this book. Now, this is The Pendulum and Your Health. So there's little kind of grids inside of it that you're supposed to hold the pendulum over. I'm going to find one. And it tells you different things about your health. Interestingly, in this particular book, it says if you're using it to ask it if you're allergic to something and it says that you're not, you don't have to look into it any further. So this is not something that I would necessarily recommend, but I know that a lot of people that use pendulums for health things or crystals for health things are able to kind of get some interesting answers. You just have to be careful and make sure that you're consulting a doctor if you have like actual physical ailments. A pendulum isn't going to cure you. So I always like to give that piece of advice because I don't think that people should be relying on crystals or pendulums or magic to cure mental health or physical ailments. Talk to your doctor. And you can use these things in addition, but be sure that you're speaking to a doctor for sure. Some people use pendulums for spirit communication. You can get a pendulum board. You can get like a yes, no, maybe board, or you can get a board with letters, kind of like a Ouija board, and you would just hold the pendulum over it and it would kind of point you to where you wanted it to go. These are really interesting. I've never actually tried this for myself. It may be a theory that I kind of put to the test at some point in the future, but I mostly use it to communicate with my higher self, and I feel very connected to this one, so I think that works for me. Some people also use them to find lost items. So if you lose your keys, you can ask your pendulum to point to you where they are, and it might point in the direction that your keys are. So that's like very interesting and something you might want to try next time you use something. You can use anything. It doesn't have to be like an official pendulum. You can stick a ring on the end of a chain or with a string. As long as it's a weighted object, anything works. So it is thought by some people that you have to believe in a pendulum in order for it to work. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've had some skeptical people play with pendulums and kind of become convinced afterwards that maybe they were able to communicate with their higher self. I guess it kind of depends on how open you are. So I don't know, that's something that you have to decide for yourself. So when you get a pendulum, I'm going to kind of show you how they work a bit. So when you get one, you would first of all pick one that you're drawn to, and take it home, and then you want to like cleanse it, clear it. So you can do that by leaving it out in the moonlight. You can wash it. If it's not water soluble, wash it in moon water, run it underwater. You can earth it by putting it in dirt outside. There's many ways that you can cleanse crystals or tarot cards, oracle cards, anything like that. So you would want to do that. And then you would take a minute to connect, hold it, let it absorb your energy, and then you would hold it up and you would ask it, what is yes? And then you would wait, and it would swing however it wants to swing for yes. And then you would ask it, what is no? And then it would swing however you want it to swing for no. And then that would be your yes and no. And that is how you would determine from that point on what your pendulum is trying to tell you when you ask it questions. So it's kind of interesting. So a lot of people have crystals that they use for pendulums. This one's tiger's eye. It was gifted to me. I went to an expo, and a woman that was there said that it was meant to be mine, and she gave it to me. And so I feel very connected to it. I feel like it's special. But you don't have to use crystals. You can use any weighted object that you connect with. You can use your wedding ring. You can use a necklace, anything that you feel a connection to. So it doesn't have to be a crystal. It doesn't have to be like an official pendulum that you bought at like a witch store. You can make your own. So I just want to make that clear. You don't have to spend a bunch of money on pendulums. Sometimes they're kind of expensive. So just go with what your intuition tells you. So that's a bit of how they work and what they do. Let's talk a bit about the history of pendulums, because it's kind of interesting. So pendulums can be traced back, like way back to the 1st century. They were used by the Han Dynasty to determine where like an earthquake was coming from. So this is like way, way, way back. So it's kind of interesting that pendulums were used for that. Obviously, that wasn't necessarily a magical thing, but it is interesting. Now, they've been used for a really long time for magic too, and we'll get into that. But a really interesting little tidbit that I learned while I was researching for this video was that they possibly were used as a torture device during the Spanish Inquisition. Now, we can't say for sure because there's no documented proof of this, but Edgar Allan Poe does mention this particular form of torture in his story, The Pit and the Pendulum. Now, I read that one when I found out that this might be something that was used back then. So I read this story to see what it was all about, and that is a crazy story. So I don't know, but you might want to check that story out because it's really good. So some people believe that this cannot possibly be true because during the Spanish Inquisition, they were not actually supposed to draw blood in their torture methods. So if they did use it, the idea was that it was a blade on a pendulum, and you would be tied down, and it would swing back and forth and kind of come down towards you, and possibly that was the torture. They never actually let the blade cut people. I'm not really sure. And it can't be proven either way. So it's just kind of an interesting, maybe fun fact, not fun, creepy fact about pendulums for torture. So pendulums have been used for magic for thousands of years. In ancient China, they were actually used to chase away and kind of deter evil spirits, and also find out where evil spirits were coming from. In Egypt, they used them to decide where to plant their crops, where they thought their crops would end up being really, would grow well, basically. So that's not really magical in nature, but I found it really fascinating. So pendulums were looked down upon a lot, and in Roman times, people were actually sentenced to death for using them. So that is not good. And that was for a number of different reasons, but that's kind of a sad thing to do with. It's just an object on a string. So In 1326, Pope John actually banned the use of pendulums to get answers, citing that this was the work of the devil. So he believed people were speaking to the devil when they used their pendulums to get yes and no answers. So he banned them. And then in the early 20th century, a lot of you will know this, pendulums started to be used to determine the sex of a baby. So they would hold the pendulum or the wedding ring of the person using them, or of the pregnant woman. They would hold the wedding ring or a pendulum over their belly, and if it went around in a circle, it was a girl, and if it went back and forth, it was a boy. Now, I have some kids, and I never tried this with any of them, so I have no idea from personal experiences if this is true or not, but some of the people that I've spoken to said that it was accurate for them. Of course, you have like a 50-50 chance, so I mean, 50% of the time it's gotta be right? Maybe? I don't know. But this is a practice that's still used today. This is one of those old wives' tales that grandmothers tell their granddaughters when they are pregnant with their first baby. And that's kind of how pendulums are most commonly used by just kind of regular non-spiritual, non-magical people now. But it's interesting to me how these kind of magical things play a part in regular people's lives and they don't even realize it. So yeah, that's it's like a lot of what I have on pendulums. I find them really interesting. I carry mine around with me all the time. I use it very rarely actually, but I use it to answer yes, no questions for myself or sometimes for other people. But it's one of my lesser used magical items. I'm not really sure why. Maybe after this video, I'll start using it more. Maybe I'll use it to find ghosts when I'm on investigations. I'm sure my team would love that. Anyway, that's what I have. If you have any questions or you have any cool stories, or if the pendulum told you your baby was going to be a girl and it was a girl, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be back on another day with another video about something totally different. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.